Hello, Zuzaman, and welcome back to the channel. By now, you have heard that I've had a rather lengthy conversation with our immigration lawyer here in Germany, and that means it's time to talk about consulates. Consulates aren't necessarily something we've talked about, but in my meeting with the lawyer, one of the things he asked me to tell you, he specifically asked me to make a video on this subject, so shout out to the lawyer. We may have been doing things backwards. There is a natural assumption or a natural tendency when we're Americans to just come over here, spend 3 to 6 months looking for a job, finding a way to settle down, this, that, and the other. And that's because we're allowed to do that. But just because we're allowed to do that as Americans, maybe doesn't mean we should. Maybe that's not necessarily the best way of going about things. And he is now suggesting that we try a completely different method. It turns out that in the United States, we have a number of consulates, plus the embassy in Washington, D.C., and it is their job to help you get visas. That is literally what they're there for. And as I mentioned in another video, you can come up with all kinds of reasons to get a visa, and it could be submitted to the consulate as the best way to go about it. Now, we still suggest that you probably meet with the lawyer, the immigration lawyer, to flesh out your ideas or your plans for coming over here just to make sure that they conform with, reality. And he can talk to you about the specifics of your individual history, if that's an issue for you. And he can, walk you through that process. But basically what would happen is you would get the application for the visa. You would submit it to the consulate. The consulate would then send it over here to Germany, and they would all handle this electronically and then send it back to you. Now, you'd want to do this 6 to 9 months before you actually intend to come over here. And there are enormous advantages to doing that. In the first place, we've told you before, standing in line or even trying to get an appointment with the Ausländerbehörde, the organization, the government office over here required for handling these work permits or residence permits, that process can be tedious. The bureaucracy is every bit as difficult as it can be in the U.S. and sometimes even worse. And we've had people have to wait up to a year to get their work permits. Shout out to you, Carrie. Congratulations for finally getting your work permit. And so you can bypass that by simply having the consulate do all the legwork for you. Because if you can imagine that if you're working in this Ausländerbehörde and all day long you're having to deal with people coming in and processing their paperwork and you're up to your eyeballs in it. But if you get an email from the consulate in the United States, it's going to get people's attention. It's going to get people's attention. You're probably going to get a much faster reaction doing that. Plus, you'll have, the comfort of staying in your own home while you wait. Also, if you're doing this 6 to 9 months before you come over here, that means let's say you're coming over here because of a job, that means you found a job. Or let's say you came up with another reason. I think in one of the videos I talked about taking pictures of ducks and turning it into a photo book. But you'd have the ability to maybe take some classes on photography. But it also means you can get into language school. You can go to language school for 6 to 9 months, and I recommend you doing that with a German school, not a school in the U.S., but an actual German language school. And because you're coming over here, it will change the urgency for you to get your language up to where it needs to be. So there's that motivating factor. There's also the motivating factor or the benefit that once you get to Europe, in other words, you get your visa and you come over here, there is no waiting period for you to get your life started. Because, for a lot of folks coming over here, their first 3 to 6 months are spent pounding the pavement looking for jobs, trying to get an apartment arranged. But if you're in the U.S. and you're planning ahead, you can have all that ready for you. So that reduces the possible moving costs of $10,000 to $12,000 or dollars, euro, whatever, and reduces that greatly down to something more manageable for, $3,000 or $4,000 euro. So it makes financial sense. And for ease of mind, that makes an awful lot of sense. So the lawyer is suggesting, strongly encouraging you to utilize the consulates, no matter what your purpose for coming over, whether it's, education, work, or taking pictures of ducks. That's what he suggests, and that's what we're now suggesting you do. The one thing he's begging you not to do is go the asylum route. Because of what we've done, and we've had some success in the asylum process, the German government changed the rules recently for the handling of the asylum cases. And I say recently, this was back in February 2024, specifically because of us. And those who are coming over now as convicted sex offenders, or those who are on the registry, they are automatically being blocked from getting into the asylum process. And it's not that they're denying you your right to raise a human rights violation. On the contrary, you're an American or a Canadian or a Brit or an Australian. You have the ability to just come over here and get a job. You don't have to go through the human rights process. And that's what he's asking us to do now. Please stop going through the asylum process. Just find any of 1,000 legitimate reasons to get a permit here in Germany. Apply for it. You can go through the immigration lawyer, reach out to us. We'll put you in touch with him. And, maybe he can help you. Oh, I know he can. Perhaps you can work out with him for him to prepare all the documents for you that you just then take and give to the consulate. Could be just that easy. So I'm always telling you, if you're not happy with your situation, do something about it. There may be a streamlined way to do it and a little bit cheaper, a little bit faster, and you can always have the lawyer help you with it. So just saying. So until next time, my friends, continue to be safe, continue to be smart, and continue to be beautiful. Till next time. Cheers.